This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by the patrons of Starwalker Studios. Learn how you can support the show at lexstarwalker.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 34 of Lex Out Loud, Writing Science Fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. This is a podcast for writers, readers, and all lovers of speculative fiction. I'm writing my third novel and taking you along for the ride. Today I want to talk about what I call the roller coaster of writing. Personally, I've found I have a lot of emotional highs and lows while writing a novel. So let's kick back and talk a bit about our feelings, shall we? But before we get into that, go through my usual routine at the top of the show. First of all, I want to give a shout out and a big welcome back to our returning patron, Kaigwar. Joined us back on the Patreon and back in the Discord this week. So great to have you back, Kaigwar. We missed you. And also, I've already gotten some great questions for the next AMA, the next Ask Me Anything, which I believe the last episode 33, was our first AMA. So I've already got some great questions for the next one. So if you were listening to episode 33 and you were bummed because you missed a chance to ask a question, well, you didn't, because I'm going to do another one. So go ahead and get your questions to me, and we'll do another of those in the near future. You can email those to me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com, or feel free to share them in our Discord server. And you can find the link to the Discord server in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. All right, so that's all that stuff. So let's go ahead and transition into our main topic today, which today's episode I decided to call Riding the Roller Coaster of Writing, kind of playing on my horrible Midwest accent there, where you can't tell if I'm saying writing or writing, can you? Because they sound the same. Sorry about that. I really hate my Midwest accent, especially, I don't so much notice it when I'm talking, but I'll notice it when I'm editing a podcast and I hear myself talking. And I really hate it. It makes me sound like a hill jack. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. So writing the roller coaster, I had this idea weeks ago for an episode when I made this observation, I was trying to say that a weird way. I made this observation in myself that I have these kind of emotional ups and downs when it comes to my writing, and it seems like a roller coaster where first you have a hill, and then you have a valley, and then you have a hill, and then you have a valley, and it just goes up, down, up, down, up, down, one after another. Because it seemed like to me that, for instance, I would have a really great writing day where, like yesterday was like this, where the words just flow. It just comes to me. I'm just typing as fast as I can. I know where I'm going. I know how to get there. I feel like what I'm writing is really good. When I read it back later, it reads really well. I think, I'm doing a great job. And my confidence is high. My motivation is high. I'm having a great time. And I'll have days like that. I had a day like that yesterday. And the observation that I made a few weeks ago was it seems like a lot of times when I have a day like that, then the next day will be a downer. If one day I'm up, the next day I'm down. So a bad writing day might be one where, every word is a struggle. I'm not sure where I'm going or how to get there. I'm not confident in what I'm doing. I don't know if it's coming across or if it's really that good. I start to wonder if the story, the ideas, the characters are all really as good as I think they are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just a lot of self-doubt. And it just seems like that. And I don't think it is always like that, but it does seem like a lot of times if I have a really up day or a really good day, then the next day will be the opposite, and I'll have kind of a bummer day. or, it works vice versa too. So if I have a day that's just a bad day, then a lot of times the next day is great. And then, there are the blah days where they're just kind of, they're not great. They're not terrible. They're just whatever. Those happen occasionally too. But yeah, so occasionally I have these kind of blah days that are neither a high nor a low. But a lot of times it seems like those days leave me with more negative feelings than positive ones. So it's almost like the mediocre days are kind of more of a down day. They're just not to the same level or extreme as really down days. So I don't know why this is, and I don't even know, is this something that's universal? Does everyone go through this? I think maybe they do. I know a lot of writers do because I've heard writers talk about this a lot, this kind of thing. Or at least maybe not so much the roller coaster, like one follows the other, but where they have problems motivating or getting their words out, or they have days where they're just not feeling it or whatever. I've heard a lot of writers talk about that. So that is fairly common. I don't know if it's universal or not. Maybe it is. Wouldn't surprise me if it is. But at the very least, it's very common. So why is that? Who knows? I don't know. And, it may be different reasons for different people. But I think part of it probably, for a lot of us at least, is that before we're successful as writers, we all struggle with self-doubt. Can we really do this? Are we really good enough? Are we going to make it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then once a writer is successful, a lot of times they still experience self-doubt and imposter syndrome, even though they've been successful. And again, this is something I've heard famous, well-known published writers talk about. So this is a thing. And indeed, many published writers that you've heard of find the process of writing itself very difficult. I've discussed on the show before about Douglas Adams and how he struggled with writing, and how I actually have a quote from him on the wall here in my studio, which is also my writing office, as a reminder that he struggled with it. And I mean, he was a fantastic writer. He was one of my favorite writers of all time, and he wrote quite a bit. And he struggled with it. Even Stephen King has his difficulties, believe it or not. In his book on writing, he talks about one of the reasons that he writes 2,000 words a day, which is where I got my whole, that's what I try to do every day. I got it from him. Well, one of the big reasons he does that is his goal, 2,000 words is the number he picked, is because he said something along the lines of, when he's writing a first draft, if he's cranking out 2,000 words a day, it's a pace that's fast enough that it keeps him in that time of excitement when you first have an idea for a book, or you first start writing on a book where you're really excited about what you're doing. It keeps, he kind of chases that feeling of excitement. And if he moves fast enough, he can kind of stay with that initial feeling of excitement and stay excited about what he's doing. And it also keeps him, he said, ahead of the self-doubt. So if he languishes too much, or if he takes too long to write that first draft, he starts to doubt what he's doing. This is Stephen King. He's a household name. According to Google, he has written over 81 novels, and he's been writing for decades. He's been writing probably as long as I've been reading. So I feel like if he has self-doubt, probably all writers do. If there is anyone out there that I would think had gotten past that, I would think it would be Stephen King. And, he wrote on writing fairly recently. It's not like he wrote this book 30 years ago. He wrote that fairly recently. So I assume it's still the case for him. So I think if Stephen King has self-doubt at this point in his career, that I imagine all writers probably do, or at least all decent writers. It wouldn't shock me if I learned that there are some terrible writers out there who have zero self-doubt. That wouldn't shock me. But I kind of think that maybe that would be the only writer that has zero self-doubt, is a writer that is just so bad they don't realize how bad they are. But I think all the rest of us, all of us who have anything from a little bit of talent or skill to a lot, we all have plenty of self-doubt. So why is this? I don't know. Your guess is probably as good as mine. But, maybe it's because writing is so subjective. You can't really define what makes good writing and what makes bad writing. I mean, you can try, and you can make lists of characteristics that good writing will have and characteristics that bad writing will have, but those lists will never be complete. You can never really completely define it, completely pin it down where, if you check these boxes, then you're dealing with good writing. And if you check these boxes, then you're dealing with bad writing. It's not that cut and dry. And ultimately, it comes down to some kind of a judgment call. And you just have to learn to recognize good writing and bad writing when you see it. And really, the only way to do that is just by reading a lot and just over time getting an intuitive feel for it. And, Stephen King talks about this in his book too. He talks about if you want to be a writer, you should be reading a lot all the time because there are so many things when it comes to the craft of writing that you can only learn through reading. And they are these subtle, hard to describe, hard to pin down things that you just kind of pick up on after you've read enough, how to pace a conversation or how to pace a scene or, how much description you should use. All these things, you just get an intuitive grasp by being exposed to a lot of good writing. And there's really no replacement for that. There's no way around that. And Stephen King talks in his book about people who claim to be writers or claim to want to be writers, but don't read, and how it's kind of a fool's errand. I think, good writing versus bad writing is also subjective in the sense that you could take a given book or a story and have a bunch of people look at it, and you could have some people who think it's well written, and you could have other people who think it's badly written, and they could argue about it and not come to a consensus. You could just have a disagreement over, is this good or bad? And, it may not be a thing of right or wrong, like the people saying it's good or wrong and the people saying it's bad or right. It may just be a matter of taste. Some of these things just come down to personal taste. There's not necessarily a black and white, right and wrong. It's more of a what do you prefer kind of thing. And different readers will prefer different things. For instance, I was speaking with one of the listeners in the Discord about points of view and tense, things like third person limited or third person omniscient or first person or God forbid second person or writing in past tense or writing in present tense and stuff like that. And that's a perfect example of something that you will get a wide variety of opinions. There are people that just don't care. And then there are people who do care and care a lot. Like, for instance, me, I prefer third person limited past tense most of the time. I can read first person when it's done well. But if I start reading a story or God forbid a novel written in some weird voice like second person past or second person present or third person present or even first person present, honestly, I will put the book down. That's enough for me that I don't want to read the book or even a short story. I'd put down short stories because they were written in a weird voice like that. And I don't want to read it. It's too awkward and cumbersome and annoying. And I have better things to do. There are better books to read that aren't written in some convoluted tense or a point of view. So that's just me. That's just my preference as a reader. So, there could be some phenomenal book written in second person present tense, and I'll never know because I won't read it. I'll get a page or two into it and be like, oh, it's like this the whole book? I'm not reading this. And I did recently actually read a book that it wasn't second person, or was it? I think it was third person, but it was present tense. I don't remember exactly now what it was, but it was a weird voice like that. And I stuck through it because it was a sci-fi book and I really wanted to read it. And what I'd read of the kind of plot synopsis or whatever sounded really interesting. So I forced myself to read it. And I mean, it never really paid off. It was okay, but it wasn't worth the pain in my butt of having to read that really awkward voice for the story that I got. And the worst thing, the most damning thing about it in the end was that it didn't make it any better. And I'll probably do an episode on this, but we have standards, what people are used to. For instance, third person limited in adult fiction, most adult fiction, that's what people are used to. That's what most adult fiction is written in, at least genre fiction. So if you're going to do something different than that, you got to have a damn good reason to throw the reader for a loop like that and to ask them to read this awkward thing they're not used to and that they probably don't like. You got to have a damn good reason, and you got to pull it off perfectly. Like, you can't make any mistakes. You've got to be a master. You can't just do well. You have to be masterful at it to pull something like that off. And this book was neither of those things. It wasn't masterfully done, and there wasn't a good reason. Something like that at the end of the book, I should have been like, oh yes, I see now why it was written in this weird tense, and it really added something to the story, and it just wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been nearly as good without it. Then it might have been justified, but that was not the case. So instead, I find myself scratching my head and wondering, how on earth did this get past the editors, and why on earth did the editors think it was okay to publish it this way? I don't know. But that's just, one of my personal pet peeves as a reader and a writer, because I won't write in those weird things either. But, people differ. So like I said, there might be some amazing book that I'll never read or never finish because it's in some weird voice like that. But other people might not have that hang up, and they read the book and they love it. So, that's not necessarily a one thing is better than the other, as just, different people prefer different things. So what do we do about all this? I guess that's the real question, right? Like, if you're like me and you experience kind of this roller coaster of ups and downs, what do we do about it? Well, I don't know that there's much that we can do. I think it's just kind of the way it is. Considering how universal this seems to be, or if it's not universal, at least very prevalent, this seems to be very common. I'd guess it's either likely a fundamental part of our psychology, of just human psychology and how our brains work, or it's a fundamental part of our socialization, how we're socialized as children into our societies. And it's a part of that our various cultures all share, or most likely a combination of the two. But neither of those things are something that you can change. You can't change your basic human psychology, and you can't change how you were socialized. Now, you can overcome some of your socialization and make different choices as an adult than what you were taught as a kid. But, those are like a few things here and there, right? You can't completely change who you are or who you were raised to be. So, this isn't probably something that you can just wave a magic wand and make it go away. It's more something you have to learn to live with, I think, and to cope with. And maybe even find a way to use it to your advantage somehow. So I think that the beginning here, or the key, is to understand that this is a thing that happens, and to be able to recognize it when it's happening so you don't get all caught up in it. So, for instance, if I'm just having a phenomenal writing day, just having a really great day and everything's going fantastic, and I feel like I'm an awesome writer and I'm unstoppable and all of that, that doesn't mean it's true, right? Just because on a particular day I feel like I'm an awesome writer and all this stuff, just because I feel that way, that doesn't mean it's true. And the flip side is also true. If I'm having a bad day and I feel like I'm a terrible writer, well, again, just because I feel that way, that doesn't mean that's true either. Chances are good neither of those things are true. I think the safe bet here is that these are emotional extremes, right? One's representing very high confidence and one's representing very low confidence. And the reality of how good of a writer am I really is probably somewhere in between those extremes. I'm not as good as I think I am on a great day, but I'm also not as bad as I think I am on a bad day, right? It's somewhere in between. So yeah, I think the good day and the bad day, they represent emotional extremes or confidence extremes, or both. high emotion or good feeling emotion versus bad feeling emotion, and high confidence versus low confidence. So on a good day, when I'm very confident, I might be overestimating my abilities a little bit. Whereas on a bad day, when I'm lacking in that confidence, I might be underestimating my abilities a little bit. So my best advice to you and myself for this is to just keep this in mind and remember that, the thing Yoda said, your perception determines your reality. It's really not true. I mean, in certain ways with certain things, there's some truth to that. But overall, in general, that is not true. Reality is reality. How you perceive it is your own little hang up. It's got nothing to do with reality. So keep that in mind. Just because you're having a great day and you feel like you're unstoppable doesn't mean that you are unstoppable. It doesn't mean that you're the best writer ever. And, that's probably easier, right? But the harder thing is on a bad day to remember that just because you feel like everything you do is shit, that it's probably not. It's probably not as bad as you think it is. So on a good day, don't get cocky. Try to stay humble and just focus on doing the work. Use those good feelings to motivate you and keep you going. You're on an emotional high right now. So this is a great time to crank out as many words as possible. Try to get a lot done. Try to capitalize on this good state that you're in. Maybe leave your daily word count goal in the dust as you greatly surpass it on that day. I'm not saying that your writing is actually going to be any better on these days. It may not. I don't know. Personally, when I go back and read stuff I've written, I really can't tell later what I wrote on a quote good day and what I wrote on a quote bad day. It's not like, I've got, I think 10 chapters done of my book right now. And it's not like I go through and some of the chapters are fantastic and other chapters are horrible. They're all at about the same level of goodness or not goodness. So I definitely can't tell, I wrote chapter 3 on a good day because, man, this chapter is awesome. And, I wrote chapter 4 on a bad day because, man, this chapter sucks. It's not like that at all. It's all pretty even keel as far as later when I read it, how good I think it is. It's all kind of on the same level. So I'm not saying on the good day that your writing is better necessarily, and that's why you should try to do more of it. I'm just saying that you're motivated and you're in the zone and you're probably more productive and getting more words per minute than you would be on a bad day. So, keep going as long as you can. Ride that wave for as far as it'll take you. You might as well leverage that good day to get you a little closer to the end of your work in progress. Now, don't overdo it. You don't want to burn yourself out because that can definitely happen. And I have done that to myself where I'm having a great day and I just keep going and I just keep going. And then it becomes a thing of, can I get another 1,000 words? Can I get another 500 words? And you start kind of competing with yourself. And you can take that too far and you get burned out. And now you're going to have a really bad day the next day because you wore yourself out. So you don't want to, go too far with it, but maybe write an extra half hour or an extra hour or an extra, 500 words or 1,000 words or whatever. Keep going until, it starts drying up and then call it a day. On the other hand, if you're having a bad day, keep all this in mind as well. You are not your emotions and your emotions are not reality. Just because you feel like everything you write is crap and just because you feel like you're wasting your time because none of this is any good doesn't mean it's true. And in fact, it's probably not true because you're being emotional. You're not being rational. You're not being objective. It's probably not as bad as you think it is. You're on an emotional low right now, so everything seems worse, right? And it's coloring your perceptions. So this might be a good time to take it easy on yourself a bit. Maybe you won't hit your word count today. Maybe you won't quite get there, and that's okay. And if you think about it, let's say it's a fairly even split. Let's say half the time you're having a good day and half the time you're having a bad day. And if on the good days you write a little more, and if on the bad days you write a little less, well, it should even out in the long run, right? If the words are coming really hard or maybe not at all, maybe there's something else you can do that's productive, that is relevant to your project you're working on right now. So maybe you can flesh out a character that you need to flesh out some more or come up with a new character. or a location that you're going to use in the near future. You could work on fleshing out details about that. Think about how you might describe it. You could think about a future scene that you know is coming up and how you might do that. If you use an outline, you could work on that a bit. So that's a step you can take between just not doing anything that day and trying to force yourself to write when you're really not feeling it. Is, well, maybe you don't want to write today, but maybe you can do something else that will help you in some way to get this thing done. And then I think there are times when you just need to recharge, to refill the creative well, and you just need some time off. Maybe go for a walk, go meet up with some friends and do something, go see a movie or whatever, go people watch somewhere, go get some exercise somehow, things like that. Whatever works for you to refill your creative energy and kind of clear the cobwebs out of your mind. Get your mind off of it. We've talked before on the book, kind of the dance between the conscious and the subconscious mind in the creative process. And a very important part of that process is there's got to be times that you let your conscious mind rest and don't force it to think about your book so that the subconscious can take over and work on it. So yeah, go for a walk or a hike or go kayaking or go for a bike ride or go swimming or, go do something with some friends. When it comes to refilling the creative well, and this is probably be a great topic for its own episode, things that tend to help me in that way are anything that involves going to a place I haven't been before, where I'm going to see things I haven't seen before, or meeting people I haven't met before, or even just seeing people I haven't met before, like going to a cafe and just observing people, or going to a mall and observing people or whatever. Those kinds of things help a lot. Any kind of creative thing that you can consume, like go see a movie, read a book, watch a good TV show, things like that, I find help me a lot. If there's certain music that gets you fired up about the thing you're working on, you can listen to that, stuff like that. Whatever works for you. I think this is a thing where everybody's going to have their own ways that they refill that well and recharge their creative batteries. I think it's better in the long run to take the time that you need to regroup, to recharge, take a break, and maybe have a better day tomorrow because of that, than to sit here and try to beat a dead horse all day and beat up on yourself and maybe increase the chance that you're going to have another bad day tomorrow because, you're just beating yourself up. And now tomorrow you're going to even be more tired and more discouraged than you are today. A single isolated bad day is fine. They happen. And, that's not going to set you back that much. But what you don't want to happen is you don't want to have that become a string of multiple bad days in a row that now becomes a new pattern of behavior and a new bad habit that now you're dealing with. Another thing you could do on a bad day to either just do something else if you're going to take the day off of writing, or to try to get yourself in the zone so you can write, is to read over some of what you've written already, especially if you can read something that you wrote, a little while ago, not what you wrote just yesterday, something that's not super fresh in your mind. So go back a few chapters or in your book or whatever and read over stuff you've done before. But yeah, read something that you did before, preferably not what you did yesterday, something that you did at least a few days ago. So it's not super fresh in your mind. So you have a little distance from it, and go read over what you wrote. This works for me a lot of times. If I have a day where I'm just having a hard time getting started, maybe it's not necessarily a bad day per se, but I'm just, having a hard time getting going. Sometimes it works just to read over something I wrote a few days ago, especially if I'm feeling a little discouraged, because a lot of times what happens is I'm like, oh, this is actually pretty good. And oh, this is actually better than I thought it was, or better than I remember. And it kind of puts some wind back into your sails. It gives you some confidence back, and you start to feel like, oh, okay, I can do this. I have done it. I can do it again. So yeah, a lot of times that'll be just the thing to kind of get me out of my little bit of a mental funk that I might be in, as I see the proof that I can actually do this right in front of me in black and white, literally. So yeah, that's it. That's it as far as advice or suggestions. I'm not an expert on any of this, and this is definitely something I deal with, which is why I'm talking about it. Which is why it occurred to me to do a show on it, is because I have noticed this pattern of up days and down days. And it's not always one follows immediately after another, but there does seem to be like this waveform to it, this oscillation of up and down and up and down. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like, can't we just have a realistic view of ourselves and what we're doing? Does it always have to be either you're a little overconfident and think a little too highly of what you're doing, or you're not confident enough and don't think highly enough of what you're doing? It's like so hard to get to that sweet spot where you just have an accurate and realistic perception of how well you're doing. And then, at the end of the day, it's like, how does my perception of how well I'm doing compare to someone else's perception of how well I'm doing? I might have finished this first draft and I feel it's amazing, but what do my alpha readers think when they read it? Will they think it's amazing or not? I guess we'll find out. And something else interesting, just a little, I don't know, a little cherry to put on top of this writing discussion Sunday here is, boy, I'm just having fun with the metaphors today, aren't I? We're writers. We love metaphors, right? But yeah, this isn't really what I was thinking about when I wrote this episode. I was thinking about this, the ups and downs, the emotional ups and downs of just my confidence level and my enthusiasm and my assessment of how well I'm doing and how good the book is. That's what I was really thinking of when I wrote this, is this kind of up and down of that. But there's another kind of aspect to this too, of the emotional roller coaster of writing. And that's the actual emotions that writing itself can evoke or invoke within you. And this is really new to me. Maybe this happened with my last book and I just don't remember. But I don't remember this happening before. But I wrote a chapter yesterday. It was chapter 10, I think. And I wrote this scene. And, it's one of those things that when I was writing it at the time, like within my mind, within my reality, to me, it felt like a very powerful scene. Like it really moved me personally to write it and to kind of see it play out in my head. But I suspect it might be one of those things where it won't be that way for people reading it, or for most people reading it. And they'll just be like, oh, that's a thing that happened. And it won't have the impact that it had on me. And I have enough self-awareness to understand where a lot of that impact is coming from. And I'm not going to go into it, partly because it's spoilers and partly because none of you signed up to be my psychiatrist or my therapist. But I think some of it just has to do with things that have happened and not happened in my life, and in parts of my life where things have maybe fallen short of what I might want or expect or deserve even. So to someone else who shared similar experiences like that, it might have a similar impact, but I think for most people, maybe it wouldn't. But it left a mark on me for a few hours, I think, after I was done writing yesterday. I was just in this kind of weird mental and emotional place. Kind of like if you watch a movie that really affects you in some way, like maybe it's a really sad movie, or maybe it's just a really dramatic movie or whatever. But one of those movies that kind of like mess with your emotions and stick with you for a while, it was like that. but from something that I had written and from just the process of writing it. And yeah, I don't remember that from before. From my past 2 books, I don't remember having that experience. So maybe I did and I just forgot about it. I feel like I would remember it because it was kind of weird and seems like something I would remember if it had happened before. But yeah, it was interesting. And I've actually had that experience numerous times with this book I'm writing right now, not to the level, not to the degree that I did yesterday, to a lesser extent. But yeah, so I don't know what that's about. I don't know if that's just that I am accessing or tapping into maybe parts of my psyche or my life or my memories that kind of are charged emotionally in a way that I wasn't with the previous books. Maybe I didn't dig that deep. I don't know. Or maybe I'd love to think maybe my writing has gotten better since then. And I'm able to, I don't know, maybe because I'm able to better express what I'm thinking or feeling, it's invoking more emotion in me because I'm expressing it better. I don't know. I'm grasping at straws here. I really don't know. It was a little, I wouldn't say it was unsettling. It was a little strange. It's kind of like if you've ever had a day, I'm sure everyone has these days, but if you've ever had a day where you're kind of in a bad mood, like maybe you're a little sad or maybe you're a little angry and you don't know why, and you rack your brain for like what caused this or what is this a reaction to, and you can't come up with anything. You just woke up in a weird mood. It's kind of like that in a way. It's like where you're having these emotions go through you, but you're not sure where exactly they're coming from or why they're there. They're just there. It kind of felt like that. But I mean, obviously I knew where they were coming from and why they were there, but that's just kind of what it felt like when you just have this weird sense of, oh, I just feel kind of down, but I don't really know why, and I can't think of a good reason why I would feel down right now. That's kind of what it felt like. So yeah, it's interesting. Also, I didn't sleep real well the night before, so maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe I'm just sleep deprived. I didn't sleep real well last night either. And I have noticed when I'm low on sleep that my emotions get a little weird. Get a little, what's the word? My emotions get emotional. I don't know. You know what's funny though? I tweeted about it on Twitter, and I was just kind of like, have other writers experienced this? You know, and this one lady, this writer, responded to me and said something along the lines of, it sounded to her like what happens to her when she's on her period, which cracked me up. Because that totally makes sense to me. And actually, I mean, I'm a guy. I don't know. I've never had a period, but I'm married. So I've been around my wife for years and years and years when she's had them. And it did track very much with how she's described how she feels at that time. And now I remember that I was going to ask my wife if it was that time, because for whatever reason, it's strange, but I tend to mirror her symptoms, and I won't even know that it's that time, but I'll just mention that I'm feeling a certain way, and she'll be like, oh, well, it's my time and that's how I feel. And it's kind of funny. You only seem to mirror my symptoms. So it's weird. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously not the case for me. It's not because I'm on my period or about to get my period. But maybe if you're a lady out there listening to this, maybe that helps you understand what I'm talking about. Although I do understand that it's very different for different women, what their experience of that is and what the symptoms are. So maybe that doesn't help. But yeah, it kind of cracked me up. I'm like, well, at least someone out there knows where I'm coming from. But yeah, it was kind of interesting because she said that when it's not that time, that she tends to write more humorous stuff. And I think is what she was saying is when it is that time, she tends to write more emotional things in other ways, which was interesting. And I guess, while I'm rambling at the end of the show here, you're just eating up time, I guess, and just thinking about this great writing day I had yesterday and kind of how moving it was in some ways. It's kind of interesting. You hear writers talk about theme, right? Like a good story has a theme or multiple themes. And if you've ever taken an English or literature class, then you've probably heard about theme and had to answer what is the theme of this story or whatever. And usually the advice that I've heard from writers talking about theme, as far as how do I do theme, is that theme comes later. Theme is not something you're thinking about in the first draft. And I believe actually, now that I think about it, I think Stephen King talks about this a bit on writing. So I can give you a specific reference of where I've heard this discussed. But he talked about this in his book a bit, about how for him and for other writers, a lot of times when you're writing that first draft, you're not thinking about theme. It's not like you're like, I'm going to write a book with the theme of whatever. You just write the story you're writing. And then during the editing and the revision process, as you're going through the various drafts after the first draft, then what you do is you look for any themes that already are there that you kind of put in the story without realizing it. And then if you find those, then you work in the editing to bring those out more. Or you look for themes that could be there, that are almost there, but not quite. But that's something that comes later after you finish the story and you're going back and refining it. That's when you start thinking about theme and either bringing out themes that are already there or trying to find good themes that would fit this story that you can work in. It's usually not something you're thinking about when you're writing the first draft. I have definitely not been thinking about theme while I've been writing this. Beyond the discussion I had in the I don't remember the episode number, but I did an episode of this show way back in the first season called something like "What Do I Want to Say?" It was about when I started thinking about, do I have any kind of overarching goals with this, or is there some kind of message I'm trying to send, or some kind of purpose to writing this that I want to realize, or something like that. And when I was thinking about that, one of the things I came up with was that I wanted to show a potential future that we could grow into that is hopeful in these dark times, to hopefully show a hopeful future that also seems realistic and possible and plausible. Because, for instance, people will talk a lot about how Star Trek shows a very hopeful, almost utopian future. But when you look at the world of Star Trek and then you look at our world today, you don't really see a way to get from A to B. The world of Star Trek is so idealized. It's so removed from our reality that, at least personally, I find the inspiration that it grants very limited because of that, because it doesn't seem real and it doesn't seem achievable. It seems like a fantasy. It'd be like saying that the Lord of the Rings is inspiring, that we can have a better world. It's like, well, no, because Lord of the Rings have nothing to do with this world. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy world. It's got nothing to do with us in this world right now. And I kind of feel that way about Star Trek because it's so utopian and it's so far in the future and it's so magical. So I wanted to do something that's a little more down to earth and a little more, seems more achievable, less far in the future, something more on the horizon. And so that could be a possible theme. But even so, it's not something I'm trying to do. I'm not like, whenever I sit down to write, I'm not thinking, okay, I need to show a better future and all this stuff. It's more in the background. It's in my subconscious, and that's happening without me trying, because I just know that that's the kind of world I'm creating. And really, a lot of that's done in the world building, although some of it is going to be done in the characters and the plot and how the characters treat one another, how they interact with one another, especially when dealing with people who are very different, and also how the characters work together to solve the problem of the book. I hope will show a hopeful view of where we could be very soon, where we work together instead of against one another. So that's one possible theme. But other than that, I haven't thought about theme at all. And as I finished writing yesterday and I finished writing the scene, I realized that already I see a theme emerging, and it's a very strong theme, like to the point that it's hard for me to believe that I didn't intend this, like that some part of my brain didn't decide to do this and just didn't tell the conscious part of me, because it's everywhere in the book. And it's a theme of friendship. And right now I have two relationships I've been focusing on in the story. One is between my main character, Tia, and the AI that runs the space station that they're on. And that's one relationship that's a big mover in the book, and is definitely showing that theme of friendship. And then there's also my main character, Tia, and a person that she works with who is from Earth, and they end up becoming friends, and they end up working together to solve the problem of the book. And they're becoming friends. And the theme of friendship is very strong in their scenes. So I didn't plan to do this. I didn't have any intention of doing this. It's just coming out organically as I write these characters. And I'm still, I don't know, it's hard to say, but I feel like I'm still leaning pretty heavily on the discovery writing side of things. I do not have an outline for the book. I have a plot synopsis. So I have a synopsis of the, it's about, I don't know, half a page, 3/4 of a page long. And it describes the situation of the book and has a very general kind of how this will be overcome, nothing specific. And that's kind of my roadmap to tell me kind of where I'm ultimately going. But like when I did Dawn of Endless Night, my last novel, I had a chapter by chapter, scene by scene outline. I mean, it was a monster. But I had every chapter outlined, and then within each chapter, I had it broken down by the scenes, because that book had fairly large or long chapters. There are some chapters that only had one scene, but a lot of the chapters had 2 or 3 scenes in them. Where this book I'm writing now, for the most part, has been one scene per chapter. There's been a couple chapters where I had some shorter scenes, and I didn't want to do a chapter that was that short. So there's some chapters that have, 2 or 3 shorter scenes in them. But for the most part, each chapter is one scene. So they're fairly short chapters overall. In fact, I'd say they trend toward around 2,000 words per chapter, because I tend to write about a chapter a day, give or take. But yeah, I'd say they're all around 2,000 words. So this has just happened. So I don't have an outline. At most, I usually have some idea of what I want to do in the next scene or the next chapter, which again, for the most part in this book are the same thing. But I don't really know how it plays out until I actually sit down and write it. And it's very much almost like playing a role-playing game in my head by myself, where I am, quote, playing the characters in the story in my mind, and I'm just following what they do and what they say, where it leads me. And it's already led me to some surprising things that I didn't anticipate. But one of those is this theme of friendship that is very strong right now. And here I am, I'm only, I'd say a quarter, maybe at most a third of the way through the first book, and already through the first draft of the first book. And already I know that it's going to have this strong theme of friendship. And normally I wouldn't even be thinking about this yet, but it's just so obvious that I can't miss it, And now that I know that that's there, of course, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind going forward and look for ways to bring that out, even now in the first draft. But that was not planned. I dig it. I like it. And, it's funny how this has evolved. I'm starting to understand why these writers who do the discovery writing, why they love it so much, because it is a lot of fun in a lot of ways, and very different from what I've done in the past, because I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't find out until I sit down and write it. And that's really fun. But yeah, it's gone directions I didn't expect. It's taken me places I didn't expect. And it's all through the chapters or the scenes that for me are the easiest to write, that seem to almost write themselves, are where it's mainly just dialogue. Anytime I have two or more characters in a scene having a conversation about something, the words just fly by. And again, it's like I'm playing almost like a role-playing game in my mind where, I have these two characters. I have Tia and Minji, and they're in this situation having a conversation. And it's just step by step. It's like Tia says this. And well, what does Minji say when Tia says that? Oh, she says this. Well, then what does Tia say when Minji says that? Oh, she says this. And it's just very organic, and one leads to another, just like when you're playing D&D and you decide how your character is going to react to something a character, the DM did or whatever. Or if you're the DM and you decide how one of your NPCs is going to react to something the players just did. It's the same exact kind of thing. And yeah, I sit down to write a scene like that, and I have some ideas of where I think the conversation is going to go, where I'm going to kind of try to steer it and kind of what the goal of that scene is. But as far as how I get there or even where I ultimately end up, I find that out as I write it out, as I play it out. And yeah, it's already led to things changing or happening that I didn't anticipate or didn't plan for. But it's interesting to me because the more I work on this, the more I feel like the story is becoming what I've been saying I wanted it to be, and moving away from what I originally thought I was creating, which sounds like a contradiction. It is a contradiction, but I'll try to explain it. So I've been saying, and I've said it on the show more than once, I think, that I want a down-to-earth story, not just, I just talked about the, not being so far in the future, not being so removed from reality, not having magical technology that is beyond our comprehension to make it more relatable and all of that. But not just that, but also just down to earth as far as the characters. My characters aren't like superstars or, they're not James Bond or some larger than life character. They're everyday people. And I mean, the situation of the book is not an everyday situation. It's a bit bigger than that. But it's also not a save the galaxy or save the planet or even, well, it is kind of save the station. But so it's a save the city level of conflict, I suppose. But I could have definitely gone bigger than that, right? But I've been saying all along, I want it to be a very down-to-earth story. I want it to be relatable. And I want it to be as low a barrier to entry as possible while still doing what I want to do. I want it to be something that someone who's never read sci-fi before could just pick up and read and enjoy. If I can dream for a minute, the thing I like to say is I think about the TV show Game of Thrones and how before that I could probably count on one or two hands the fantasy shows that had been on TV, and none of them were terribly popular, I don't think. But with Game of Thrones and with its popularity, at least until the last couple seasons when it started tanking, but before that, when it was good and people were loving it, it greatly increased the popularity of fantasy. And I imagine that there's lots of people that went and read those books that had never read fantasy before. I imagine there were people who went and started reading other epic fantasies who'd never read fantasy before. And there are definitely suddenly more fantasy TV shows being made that would have never been made before. For instance, the one I'm looking forward to, The Wheel of Time, that would have never happened without Game of Thrones, showing that such a thing could be popular. There would have never been a Wheel of Time show without the Game of Thrones. There probably would have never been a Witcher show without the Game of Thrones. So what I would love is for my book to be able to do that for sci-fi. just like Game of Thrones pulled in all these people who were not fantasy fans, who maybe never seen fantasy before, or at least never liked it before, pulled in all these people and introduced them to this new genre, and they realized, hey, I can get into this. I would love my book to do the same thing for sci-fi, and to pull in people who never read sci-fi before or never liked it before, but they can get into this. Or a similar thing would be like what Twilight did with vampire stuff or urban fantasy. It's the same kind of thing. I just talked about that in a recent episode about how there was this window in time where those Twilight books were crazy popular, and there were all kinds of people reading them who normally didn't read at all, much rather read vampire stories or urban fantasy. So I'd love to do that for sci-fi. Now that's an exceedingly arrogant thing to say, and I realize that. And I'm not saying that I think I can do it. I'm just saying that's what I hope to do, and I'm going to try my best to do. So that's what I've been saying all along. I want it to be relatable. I want down-to-earth characters. I don't want this huge save the galaxy plot, blah, 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 blah. But when I first started working on this, when I first started working on the actual story, the plot, a lot of the ideas I was kicking around, a lot of the things I were coming up with were these very big ideas. In fact, one of them I thought was too big and decided to do that for the prequel. So at some point I course corrected, obviously. And also that was before I started actually writing. So now as I'm writing it and as I get further and further in the book, it is becoming what I wanted. It is this down-to-earth thing where one of the main themes of this story is just going to be friendship and just about how different people who come from different places, different walks of life, maybe even different species, in the case of the AI, how they can become friends and learn to work together and to solve problems together and to enrich each other's lives to where, they're happier now that they have this new friend than they would have been without that person. And I mean, you can't get any more down to earth than that. How many works of literature or just mundane non-genre fiction have had a theme of friendship? I mean, thousands, maybe millions, who knows? I mean, it's a very common theme, but it's also very relatable. It's very down to earth, and it's a theme that can fit in any genre, any time period, anywhere. It works anywhere. One of the other themes I think is emerging with the main character is being your own person and making your own way in life. And at the same time, being able to accept the help of others, but not letting that define you or letting that limit you. That theme isn't as well. I got to work on the description of that, but yeah, that's another theme that again wasn't really intentional. I didn't mean to create that theme, but I did. When I came up with this whole dynamic of the main character having this grandparent who was very famous and heroic, and everyone expects her to live up to that. Once I decided to do that, like this theme was kind of a gimme at that point. So anyway, there was a huge tangent on themes, but that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I've been thinking about. And I guess just follow the story where it takes you. It's a lot of fun. And I tell you what, if you're like I used to be, if you're an outliner, if you're someone who feels they need to design a plot and like figure out everything ahead of time before you even write it, maybe try the discovery stuff, because man, I am having a blast with it. And I really didn't think I had the chops for it. I really didn't. And honestly, I still don't know if I do. It's definitely a struggle, but when I have those good days and things are really rolling, it's a lot of fun. And I do like the sense of discovery where I don't know everything that's going to happen in this book yet. Like when I was writing Dawn of Endless Night, when I was halfway through that book, I knew what every chapter was going to be. I knew what every scene was going to be. I knew exactly how it was going to end. This is completely different. And something else that's interesting is I remember Dawn of Endless Night. I remember it got really tough after the halfway point. I think the last half of the book was way harder to write than the first half was. And it seemed to get progressively harder the further I went. Like I'd say the last quarter of the book was the hardest part to write. And it wasn't really about the ending. You know, people talk about endings being hard. It wasn't that. It wasn't that I didn't know how to end it or how to make the ending satisfying. It was more a thing of just not wanting to do it like I was sick of it. I didn't want to do it anymore. I just wanted to be done. I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I hadn't reached the end yet, and I was already had enough and didn't want to do it anymore. So I feel like this won't be like that because I don't remember having this kind of excitement when I wrote that book. And I think it's because I'm leaving so much open and I'm letting myself just be creative in the moment and come up with stuff on the fly and trying to discovery write more. And it seems to bring in this level of fun that I think will carry through to the end of the book, where in Dawn of Endless Night, by the time I was 3/4 of the way through the book, like I said, I knew every scene, every chapter, what was going to happen. It's like watching a movie that you've already seen before. It's just not as engaging as watching a movie you've never seen before. Where I think with this book, when I'm at the 3/4 point, you know, by then I'll have a really good idea, I'm sure, of how everything's going to go, but I won't have it outlined scene for scene. I won't know exactly everything that's going to happen. So I think, you know, it'll be less of that, like losing interest in it. So if that's true, that alone is reason enough to do it this new way from now on, because yeah, that was really rough. I remember that. That was the hardest part was finishing that book. And it took me a long time too, because I just didn't want to do it. It was so hard to make myself sit down and write on it. I'd fallen out of love with it. You know, I was bored with it. So yeah, we'll see when I get to that point with this book, but my feeling right now is that this will be different and it won't be like that. So hopefully that's the case. Well, I would love to hear from you if you have any thoughts on what I talked about today, or if you have any questions for a future AMA, or if you'd like to let me know what you're working on. I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-465-5391. Finally, you can join our community on Discord. You can find a link to our Discord server in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. And finally, if you would like to support the show, you can become a patron, and you can find a link to our Patreon page in the show notes as well. And really appreciate all the patrons. And thank you so much to all the patrons for supporting the show and what I do. And if you are I think it's a tier 2 patron, it's I believe the $5 per month level, you get access to the writer's room, which is a special part of the Discord just for the patrons, where it's a little less noisy in there and we can have more serious discussions about writing or the show or gaming or whatever you want to talk about. Oh, which reminds me, one last thing. Speaking of the Discord server, I just added a bunch of rooms to the server. So it used to be we just had the one room, the peanut gallery for everyone, and then I had the writer's room for the patrons that have access to that. But that was it. And I was kind of waiting to have more people and activity in the server before I made a bunch of rooms. But I don't know. I just, this last weekend, I just decided to go for it. So I made quite a few new rooms for different topic discussions. So I may not remember them all now because there's quite a few now, but we have a room for discussing tabletop RPGs. We have a room for discussing Magic the Gathering. We have a room for discussing TV and movies. We've got one for music. Let me think. I think that might be it right now. Oh, video games. We've got one for video games. So, yeah, you know, part of that is just to try to keep things a little more organized so people can pay attention to the discussions they care about and not have them get lost in stuff maybe they don't so much care about. And also just to encourage people and remind people that you can talk about all these other things. You can talk about whatever you want in the Discord. So, yes, in the future, if you're in the Discord and you think we need a new room for some kind of topic, let me know. And, you know, I can create more rooms. So one final thing as far as the Discord, recently added threads, which is a really nice feature. And if you are a member of the Discord server and you were trying to use the threads and they weren't working for you, I discovered this weekend that some of the permissions were out of whack on the server when they introduced the threads feature. I had to go through all the different roles and assign permissions, and I didn't realize that. So I think especially for the patrons, I think some of their permissions were screwed up, so they couldn't make new threads or whatever. But yeah, I got all that fixed, so you should be able to use those now. But yeah, if you have any problems with the Discord, or if you join the Patreon and you have any problems getting your role assigned in the Discord, let me know. And otherwise, I hope to see you in there. And yeah, feel free to check out the various topic rooms that I've made and participate in all that you want. It'd be great to see you in there and hear from you. And that's it for today. So thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be back soon with another episode. And until then, keep writing.